All right, so this is help on period, amplitude, and vertical shift. Okay, so we have a function given to us, and we need to select which of these is going to be our function. So let's look at number 1. So we have sine of 3 theta. Now theta is the same as x in all of these, so just think of it as the same, it's just a different symbol. Theta is just the formal variable used for angles. All right, so if we remember, our general form for sine slash cosine functions is going to be a sine, in this case, of bx minus h. A being the amplitude, b being the variable. This helps find our period. And then we have h, and that's going to be the vertical shift. Okay, so now that we've identified all of those, there's a formal term for b, but this is how I'm going to be talking about it. So let's look at our first one. So we have y equals sine of 3 theta. Now, let's identify some things. So a is our amplitude, which would normally be right here. Well, we can still say that there is a number there. It's just 1. So we now know that we have an amplitude of 1. Now let's identify b. Now b is going to be the number, and I'm going to use a different color. B is the number that's attached to x or theta, and it is 3. And then lastly, we have h, which would be right here, and it's like we have plus 0, so h is going to be 0. So there is no vertical shift, there's an amplitude of 1, and 3 is what's going to be helping us find our period. Now let's find our period just so that we can use it in case. So finding the period is going to be identified as, and I'm going to put it over here, it's like this is my notes that I need to know. And we can find period using 2 pi over b. Okay, so if we know that our period is going to be found with 2 pi over b, we have 2 pi over 3. So our period is 2 pi over 3 in this case. Okay, so let's look at our options. So A, well, it looks like our period goes from here to here. So our period is 2 pi. So that doesn't work. All right, let's look at our next one. We have, and we'll just keep with period. Period is going to be 2 pi over 3. So we should be at 2 pi over 3 when we come back. So we start here, going along, and find that our period ends here at 2 pi. Well, b does not work either. All right, 2 pi over 3. So for our number c, we have our function starting here, and it stops about here at 2 pi. Well, again, that does not work, so it is not c. It's a good D. And we have it going from here to about here. And I can definitely say that my pen is not working. That is not 2 pi, and 2 pi over 3 is less than pi. So that works out. So our answer is D. All right. Now, you don't have to always do this by your period. You can always use your amplitude and your vertical shift as well. Amplitude is 1, so your distance from the midline should be 1. Your vertical shift is 0, so the midline is going to be at the x-axis. So those are another things. We'll use number 2 using different information. Okay, so number 2. We have 4 cosine 2 theta minus 2. Now, we have cosine, so it's going to be a little bit different, but not too much. but the general form is the same. It is still y equals a, and just imagine this is cosine. A cosine bx minus h. So let's identify those items. So amplitude is right here. So amplitude is 4. B, we find B with the number attached to theta slash x, and it's 2. And lastly, we have H, our vertical shift, and H is going to be negative 2. So make sure it's a negative, not positive. It's going to be negative. Oh, this is plus. All right, so let's use our midline this time, meaning the vertical shift. So I'm going to use the vertical shift for this one. So if we have a vertical shift of negative 2, that means our midline, instead of it being y equals 0, it's going to be y equals negative 2. So let's look at these. So it should be centered around negative 2. All right. So for A, my midline is at negative 2. It's equidistant with the amplitude. So A is an option. Let's look at B. So B, negative 2, it is equidistant on the amplitude. So negative 2, so B is a possible answer. C, I can see that it's centered around the x-axis, so it's definitely not C. And then for D, it is centered around positive 2. Well, remember, we need negative 2, so D is not our answer. So because we still have 2 answers left, we have to use another piece of information. So for this one, I'm going to use my amplitude. I'm going to use the amplitude. My amplitude is 4. So that means from the midline to the peak, whether it be a top or bottom, it's going to be 4. So let's look at A. So from our midline to my top peak, it's a negative 2 to positive 2, and that's 4. And then for my bottom peak, I have negative 2 to negative 6, and that's 4 as well. Okay, so A is a possible answer. Let's look at B. So we have negative 2 to 0. That is a distance of 2. And then we have negative 2 to negative 4, and that's 2. Well, B, because it doesn't have an amplitude of 4, this does not work. So our final answer is A. So that's kind of how you do the first 4 questions. Now let's go to the last 2 questions. So this time we're given the graph and we need to match it to the equation. All right. So one thing I always like to start with when I have these is the midline and the amplitude, because those are the easiest to find. So the midline is going to be that center line, and we can also find it by using wonderful, wonderful math. So we got to identify our peaks, and they are maxing out at 2 and maxing out at negative 2. So my top peak is 2, and my bottom peak is negative 2. So to find the amplitude, we're going to do our top minus our bottom, and that will give us the distance, but then we have to do the distance divided by 2 to find the amplitude. So let's do that. So top minus bottom, so top is 2 minus our bottom, which is negative 2. Now I'm going to transform that to what it should be, so 2 plus 2, because a negative and a negative make a positive. And it's going to give us 4. So our distance is 4. So now I need to do 4 over 2. And then that gives us an amplitude of 2. So now that we know our amplitude is 2, we know that the number that's going to be multiplying our cosine is going to be 2. So I can already eliminate C and D because they don't have that. All right, so now let's figure out the difference between A and B. So A and B, it looks like that there is a 2 in front of our x versus a 1. So we need to figure out if that's going to be the case. So that means we need to find our period. Now to find our period of a cosine, it's going to be the distance between the peaks. So this distance here. So I have 0 to pi. So my period is pi. Now we're going to use that same formula as before, so period equals 2 pi over b, to find if our value is going to be 1 or 2. So knowing that p is pi, so period equals 2 pi over b, we're going to solve for b this time. So I'm going to multiply by b to both sides. So now I have b times pi equals 2 pi. And then I'm going to divide by pi. And those cancel out and those cancel out. So b equals 2. So it tells me that in the parentheses I should have 2x. So my answer is choice B. All right. So now I hope that you can do those last 3 problems on your own. All right. So have a good day and stay safe.